Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the Retirement Readiness Podcast. As always, we have Tim Regan, the founder and wealth partner at Prairie View.
Hey, Katie.
And I'm Katie Umland. So this week we're going to try something a little different. As we logged in to record, our producer was like, hey, I'm going to throw a topic at you, and that's what you're going to talk about now. So we're kind of rolling with it.
Yeah. Well, let's see.
Jazz
Hopefully,
it up a little.
see if it works. It's almost kind of like a twist between podcast and Stump the Chump, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Exactly. So today we're going to be talking about how to build a diversified investment portfolio, and how you can pick things that you're interested in, but also kind of be protected, and what your total investment strategy looks like.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny, when you start talking about that stuff, I always go back to like how risky is somebody, or how risk adverse are they? And what happens a lot of times is we'll have people that come in that in most everything, they're extremely conservative. You'll talk to them about putting money in their 401k and they're like, I want to put into the fixed account. I don't want to take a lot of risk. And then out of nowhere, they'll be like, I want to put all my cash in crypto.
Into crypto.
Yeah. And they're like, how do these two things kind of like balance each other? And it's funny because when people get interested in something, they usually tend to say, oh, I'm going to bring the risk of that way down. Like in their minds, they think that's not risky. And so a lot of times you find where people that are kind of out of that groove, or they're out of the groove of what their normal tendencies would be. And so when we start building that portfolio, the first thing we would do is suggest that you know what your risk score is. Something that's fairly new in our industry. And if you want, you can head out to the website, the Prairie View website, that is. And we've got a link there where you can, for free, we'll let you, run your risk score. It's a quick survey, takes, I think,
So this is like a personality test, but
kind of, yeah.
Like does it link to Cosmo.com?
It does not, nor does it link to like, what is that, singlefarmers.com or like, any of that kind of stuff. But no, so what your risk score is it's a way for us to gauge what an appropriate portfolio would look like for somebody. And so when you do that, there's, like I said, it's quick and easy. I think there's 6 questions or something. So it's not a hard process. It takes just a couple of minutes. But what will happen is it will give you a speed limit. The speed limit goes from 1 to 100, and it'll tell you you're a 50-mile-an-hour speed zone person. Well, then we have the ability to look at investments and look at a portfolio, and we can say, well, how fast is that portfolio, or how much risk are you taking in that portfolio?
So 100 would be that you are all in on risk?
All in on risk. Okay. Yeah. Like a 1 is you're not
putting
sure
your money under the mattress.
It might not be safe enough,
okay.
Right? Under the mattress. You like hold on to it in your fists or something, right? And then a 100 is I'm as risk on as I can be.
Okay. And so is it a mix of both your personal preference and things like your age?
So really age has less to do with it. It's really more personal preference.
Okay.
Because there are people, and what had happened in the past, some of those risk profile tools ended up being driven primarily on time. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that my experience is what I want it to be. Just because I have 35 years before I retire doesn't mean that I want my portfolio
living in fear because you're not
exactly
a person
that's not
risk.
who I am,
yeah.
Right? And so really we've started to shift some of those things and say the time aspect of this, yeah, there's a component to that, but another component is just who am I intrinsically, and especially like I think about, when you go to, I think about my family. If we ever went to Six Flags, Tim, Lily, even Grace, they're all about, let me get the roller coaster, the giant drop. Like, where can I push that envelope? Madeline, she's like, I think the swings are too much, right? She's like, that's not my jam. And when you think about that with your investments, it's the same thing. Why do you want, just because you're at Six Flags, just because you have a lot of time, why do you say I want to take all the risk of a roller coaster? If I don't enjoy that, then let's find a way to manage a portfolio to get the return necessary for you to hit your goals, but also to try to match that up.
And so it's not only, when we're talking about diversifying your portfolio, it's not just picking different stocks. It's also mutual funds. It's some uh, life insurance
It's
is
yeah, for sure. So when I think about your portfolio or a portfolio, we really think about making sure that the risk that we're taking is smart risk. And so when you talk about different stocks, yes, but you mentioned also things that are like what we'd consider fixed income. So fixed income, when you think about that, that's a word you might hear, uh, investment people talk about. Really, just think about I have a rate of return that's going to come to me like a dividend or an interest rate that I know if I hold on to this, I should, for the most part, know that I'm going to get that income. So if you think about like a bond is something where you say, I'm going to loan a company some money or the federal government some money, and they're going to give me an interest rate on that. Maybe it's 5%. So I know my interest or my income is now fixed. I'm getting 5% interest on that investment. So when we say fixed income, don't it shouldn't be like anything fancy. It's just I'm giving somebody some money that I'm loaning them, and they're going to give me an interest rate on it. And so it should have fixed income. It should have stocks, which are considered equities. Um, so yeah, it's kind of all of those things in one.
when I think about like diversifying my portfolio, I guess you kind of do that in a lot of different aspects of your life, right? Like not just your finances. Like you don't want to curl your hair every single day
Well,
because
I don't.
then it's not going to curl right. You have to diversify. Some days wear it straight so that when you do curl it, it has a better curl.
I see. See, I that maybe that's where I went wrong.
So
Maybe that's where I went wrong. The whole world is opened up
so
to me now.
there's a lot of
Yes.
different
Yeah. Well, there you're right. In your life, it's kind of that whole uh old mantra, everything in moderation, right? So even when you think about when you go to sit down and eat your dinner, what do they talk about? Have a colorful plate,
yeah.
right? And so there's a lot of things that you want to diversify in. And
And it's the same thing just even with eating. Like, yes, protein's good for you, but if you only eat protein
yep,
forever for every meal all day long, your body is not going to
absolutely.
respond to that.
No, for sure. And it's the same thing with your workout, right? If I only run and I run marathons, that's fine. But it's also been shown that you need to also add some strength training in.
Yep.
It can't just
Never
be
skip leg day.
that's right. That's what they always say.
That's what they always
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. And so when we think about your portfolio, it's as we have people that come in or clients that come in and say things like, should I be in crypto or should I? Sure. I mean, if that's something you want to do, if that's something you have an interest in, you now to think of it as it's an investment that I can understand the same way that I can understand a stock or a bond. It's not. But if you want to try it, sure, go ahead and try it. But you don't try that with
Your whole
100%
life
of the
savings.
portfolio,
Yeah.
right? You try that with a piece and see how does that work.
That is only confirmed by the podcast I'm listening to right now is the trial of Sam.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah,
Sam Bankman Freud,
yeah,
which
yeah,
name sounds like fraud.
yeah.
So I don't know why that wasn't the
Hello,
first.
yeah. Well, and the thing that's crazy with that stuff is, uh, whenever you have an industry where there's a lot of money that's being put into it and it's not highly regulated, you're going to end up in that space, right? And when you, I mean, and even if you go back to what crypto started as, uh, so crypto really, I mean, at its heart, I don't know how much history anybody's done on crypto, but at the heart of it, it really was meant to be a way for people to have complete anonymity, uh, in almost like an anti-government type of a thought. Like they didn't want control, they didn't want oversight. They wanted people to have complete anonymity, and almost like we hear all this stuff about on social media about who's tracking you, what's on your phone. Big Brother knows what's going on, and that was the thought behind it. Uh, but then that morphed into if I can be anonymous, then I can use it for illegal purposes or
Yeah, good
purposes
and
that I
evil.
shouldn't,
Yeah.
right? Uh, and great book if anybody's interested in crypto, not about investing in it, but how it has actually come full circle. And now, if you want everybody to know what you're doing, do it with crypto, because of the nature of it. it can be backtracked very easily. The
Mm.
FBI and things have cracked down hugely on a number of places. Now there's technology now is being changed where they're trying to make it more anonymous. But just as a side note, Tracers in the Dark, great book if you're interested in it. But when you start looking at some of those things, you start to say, okay, new technology, not regulated, money's flowing to it. Of course, there's going to be somebody in there who sounds like fraud that becomes a fraud, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So kind of how we got started on this topic, I guess kind of maybe leads to our mailbag. We had somebody write in, since Disney is kind of in the news a lot lately, kind of a hot topic. They're interested in, Disney has kind of recently shifted on how they are running the business, I
Mm-hmm.
guess you could say. Um, and if they are interested in investing with Disney, but they don't want to go kind of full swing all in,
Well,
how
yeah,
can they
and that's just
diversify? Or
that's just such a hot topic in general. It's funny because until the mailbag came in, I hadn't been paying much attention to it. But then as you hear it and you start thinking, and I guess let me back up. So in the mailbag, what they're talking about was Disney kind of making these proclamations that they're going to focus primarily on putting content out that they think has a moral purpose versus what they think is going to make money. And really, some of the questions start to come into, is that a company's role, is it not?
Mhm.
How is that company representing
And
shareholders?
morally to who?
Yeah, exactly.
Like when you're a business,
My morals, your
right?
morals.
What does that mean?
Yeah,
It's so subjective.
yeah, and what I think that there's some other firms out there that are trying to do that, especially in the investment space, and from our perspective, the that's the hardest question, right? Morally to who? Because I know that I look at a lot of things that a company like a Disney does, and I'm like, there's a lot there that is not in alignment with what I would think is my morals. Now, do my kids own every single Disney movie ever
Yeah.
had? And have they watched all of them? Of course they have, because they're built into those movies are good stories. There
Hmm.
are good lessons, those types of things. And so the question really comes, uh, how do I choose a company that I want to invest in? If I'm looking at it purely from a moral perspective, that's a whole different lens. If I'm going to be a moral investor, which, by the way, people may have heard of ESG, uh, and ESG really is all about how do I invest with what I think is a
What
moral
is
hat.
ESG? I
Uh,
don't know what ESG
so
is.
it's environmental, social, governance types of looking at things. And so is like, maybe I don't, if I'm an ESG investor, maybe I don't invest in coal mines because that's not environmentally friendly.
Okay.
Um, or if I am looking to do that kind of investing, maybe I don't invest in a company that has poor labor practices because socially I don't think that that's the right thing to do, as an example. But the question always becomes, whose morals and whose viewpoint? And now it's a little bit different from a Disney perspective, because I can choose whether or not I want to buy stock in
Hmm.
Disney.
Right.
However, at some point, you have to ask, like, some of the questions were, hey, can Iger do that? And doesn't he have a right to, or a responsibility to his shareholders and that stuff? And yeah, there's to a certain extent, but really who has that right is the board of directors. The board of directors is there in order to represent shareholders. And so that's where I think these questions start to be asked, is what is the board of directors purpose, and how do you make sure that that company is going to be a good company to invest in kind of over the long haul?
So Iger is the
He's the head honcho, kind of the
president
CEO of
of
Disney.
Disney, and
Yep.
he answers to the board of
He answers the board
directors.
of directors. Yeah. Yeah. For those that maybe don't know how some of that business stuff works, the person that is out there, the face of the organization, they typically answer to the board of directors. Many times they might have a seat on the board. You might see that they're the president of the board and CEO, and so they're very much ingrained in that leadership of the firm. But they ultimately answer to the board of
So
directors.
kind of the checks and balances.
It is, and the board of directors is there so that they can represent shareholders. So shareholders, you hear shareholders, I own stock, equity. What does that mean? It means you own the company. And as the owner of the company, you have elected this board of directors to run the company on your behalf and to look after your best interests. Um, so yeah, I mean, it opens up a whole.
So you're saying that Iger, his idea might be to run Disney based on morals, not based on making money, but ultimately the board of directors
So that'll
have to okay that
yeah, so
basically.
that'll be a board of directors decision, and the board, I'm assuming, has had those conversations and made those decisions. Otherwise, it wouldn't be out in the ether right now, right?
Right.
It'd be not being talked about. And so which is really kind of this weird crossroads that we're seeing. And I think that there's some benefit to, I think business has a responsibility to make sure that they're doing right by society. But at the same token, uh, I don't know that it's their job to dictate what happens. But I'm also a firm believer in capital market system and free market system.
Mm-hmm.
And so if Disney does this and people don't like it,
It won't work.
it won't work.
Yeah.
And people will sell their stock, and Disney stock value will go down. And
Or maybe Disney looks different. Maybe it doesn't look like it does today, and
yep.
it evolves and is something completely different if
Well,
that's where they want to
and
go.
maybe that's good,
Find
because
their
then maybe I
own.
can take my kids to Disney and not cost like my 401k balance to spend a day there, right? Uh, and so,
But it also makes me think of businesses like Chick-fil-A and Hobby Lobby that are
mhm.
closed on Sundays.
Yep, yeah,
I mean, it's
absolutely,
not answering to the same, it's not quite the same, but
but it is
they're playing to their morals
absolutely. And so
rather than money.
yeah, and I think that that's important for people to think about. And there's two kind of ways that you get to vote with those things. You get to vote with your checkbook when you choose where you go to buy things and whatever. And so if that aligns with my morals, I might choose to go to Hobby Lobby before I go to a different store that's their competitor because of that. But the other way I get to vote is if I think that's a great idea, I can buy stock in that company. Um, now, and I think that companies have the ability to do that, but the board of directors still has to look and say what's in the shareholders' best interest as before we make any of those major changes. So, what might be different there is if Hobby Lobby decided that we're only going to sell Christian uh, goods, right? It has to. Well, maybe that business decision is different than just saying we run our company with that Christian perspective. So it's really interesting how those things are kind of playing out right now, and because they're playing out in a lot of different places, a lot of different spaces.
So I guess ultimately what we're saying is diversify,
Yeah. So
right?
yeah. So
So
if we go back
let's
to
land it a
yeah.
little.
Oh, you mean this wasn't supposed to be like Tim get on a soapbox and just start talking about stuff? But I guess that's what happens when you let the producer just pick out of a hat and
Yeah.
say, "Hey,
Yeah,
what
talk
topic
about
we're
this
going
for
to do?" Yeah,
25
yeah,
minutes.
yeah. And so no, I think that when we look at that and you start saying, "Okay, so how do I diversify a portfolio?" My suggestion is you start with how much risk am I willing to take. Then I combine that with what are my goals. So if I know that I want to retire in 30 years and I am a risk score 60 person, then I can start using that to build my financial plan that says, is taking a risk score of 60 going to get me where I need to get? Or do I need to save some more in order to do that? Um, but the key is you can take some risk. Even if you're a conservative investor, you can take some risk, but don't take so much risk that it pushes you outside of that comfort
And
zone.
maybe you can kind of use it as guardrails, that risk score. So, like you were saying earlier, if you start thinking about or start hearing about crypto, you get super interested and you're not typically risk adverse, or you are risk adverse, and that wouldn't typically jive. So maybe you can say, okay, I'm really interested in crypto, but my risk score is only 40. So maybe that means I take a small chunk of
Absolutely.
crypto.
Well, and what can happen with that is, just as an aside, uh, the tools that we have today, we can show what happens if I put $20,000 into crypto. What does that do to my risk score?
Okay.
So that I was at a 40, now I'm at a 62. Oh, wow, that's more than I thought I wanted to be. Maybe I dial it back a
Dial
little
it
bit.
back.
Because what happens is when you think about risk comes in lots of different varieties. And so I'll use us as the example. Um, Prairie View is a business that we run, and we have Sarah and I have much of our investments, if you will, going back into Prairie View. For me, I don't view that as a big risk because it's a business I own, a business
Mm-hmm.
I operate, a business I know. It's been a good business to us. And so I don't view that as a lot of risk. But from the outside, we're a tiny company. It would be really easy for us to have something happen, right? Versus a Fortune 500 company. So there's some risk there. But we also have a really long history and a really stable track record that takes away some risk. And so, when you start looking at different investments, it's not just how volatile will this be? Will this company go out of business? It really has multiple angles that we look at it to say how much risk are we taking.
And I think it's also going back again to that risk score. You can start by saying, oh, I'm interested in crypto. And so you have this small chunk, but then you kind of get used to that small chunk. And then maybe you become more and more and
Mm-hmm.
more, you're taking on more and more risk because you start getting kind of used to it and you don't realize like, oh, I'm suddenly,
Absolutely. Yeah, which is why a
I'm kind
lot
of
of
covered
times,
here. Like,
yeah. Oh, for sure, Katie. Yeah, and like a lot of times that's why if we take some of those riskier investments, we actually set rules up that say, okay, once I grow to this point, I'm taking my original principal off the table. And
mm-hmm.
I'll leave just the earnings invested still
Yeah.
or something to where I don't end up in a place where half of my portfolio is sitting in Tesla stock because I just let it keep investing.
Yeah. That's going back to this podcast I'm listening to. It featured somebody who had invested in with FTX and started with a small amount. And when it all crashed, he had everything in it
Yep.
because he got more and more used to it. And you kind of drink that Kool-Aid a little bit with when you start going down a rabbit hole and listening to more and more.
Yeah.
You feed what you're interested
Absolutely.
in, and then you kind of lose sight of.
Well, and what happens is when you start to get a little bit of a win, all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, I want more of that, and so you start feeling more and more like it's a sure thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so in your mind, the risk level starts to come down because you've seen some wins.
Yeah.
Uh, and so that can kind of feed, and it's funny because it works the other way too. It can also work when you get out and take, like, let's say you take some money off the table, all of a sudden you're like, oh, look, it went way up. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. I should have kept more in or
Yeah.
whatever. But no, you've got to be really disciplined in saying, let me pare off a piece of this and know how much risk I want to take, make sure I'm managing my risk score, and that it's inside of a diversified portfolio.
All right.
All right. So yeah, so I'd say if you're curious, want to know what your risk score is, hit the website. We've got a link free. We'll tell you what your risk score is. And then if you end up wanting to have further conversation, we can look at a portfolio and match up and say, here's how much risk you actually have in a portfolio compared to what your risk score is, which is kind of a shameless plug for our website and our services. So, so as we wrap up though, Katie, what's going on in the Umland house?
Oh, what is going on? Getting ready for Christmas.
Yeah, how is
We're
that?
a couple weeks out from
I
Christmas at
had
this point.
if I could write the mailbag question, I was going to write to you since you have the little kids. So, do you think Santa's sleigh is considered to be like green fuel, like,
Yeah.
or do you think it's like because
In
I
our
hear
house, I think it's an electric powered
well,
sleigh.
because I'm thinking even like the like reindeer, that you would think that is an easy uh uh, environmentally friendly power
Mhm.
source. But then I hear all about how like most of our stuff is from cow farts.
Yeah, I was gonna say
I'm
those
like, so
gases,
yeah,
man.
yeah. So like, I don't even know because I was thinking it's a whole different problem set now.
Yeah, last year Dylan didn't. He was about what was he like 9 months old last Christmas, so he didn't have any idea this Christmas everything is ho ho ho. So
That's awesome. And is he? Can he control himself from touching the tree? And
no,
no.
he's doing very well. Getting better every day, but he just carried a little reindeer over to me today. So sometimes are
That's
better than
awesome.
not.
Yeah, I wish we had those days back sometimes. Because now it's just
It's
with all the
evolving.
older kids, it's a different
It's different. It's
experience.
different. And now you get to see them in a different way at Christmas, but then soon it's going to be your own grandkids.
Yep.
So it's ever
Yeah.
evolving.
Well, and the part that I tell everybody is we're in that stage of life where things get really expensive.
Yeah.
Like, because when kids are your kids' ages, when you go out to Christmas dinner or whatever, if you're going out to dinner, they eat from the kids' meal
Yeah.
and it's like not very expensive. And now we're in the phase
everybody's
where
getting glasses of
yeah,
wine
and oh, by the way, I'm married now,
yeah.
and so it's
Your
like
kids have doubled,
yeah,
and they
yeah. I'm like, hey, sir, maybe we have to refinance the house to because we're going to Christmas dinner because that's our routine. Our routine is on Christmas Eve we go to church and then after church go out to dinner as a family, and so
well, not only dinners but gifts as they get older. They don't want, you know,
you mean
a
the
Nerf gun.
no, yeah, yeah. Which Timmy asked me the other day. If we thought that Dylan was too little for his first Nerf gun, and I said probably, yeah. So, well, we hope that everybody has a Merry Christmas, whatever their traditions are, right?
So thank you so much for joining us today on this week's episode of the Retirement Readiness Podcast. Find us on YouTube, like our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we will see you soon. Be well.
Be well.